It's okay to be broken. It's okay to laugh and cry. 'Cause when you try to see the problem, that means you figure it out. And you can say that I'm crazy, that you're thinking already, but I'm telling you, baby, yeah, get up and get out. Get up and get out. Yeah, and you can say that I'm crazy, that you're thinking already, but I'm telling you, baby. And you can say that I'm crazy, that you're thinking already.
And now it's time to get unmasked. Please welcome your host, Pamela Elaine Nichols and Cheryl A.S. Haley.
Hello.
Hey, we're happy for ourselves, right?
Absolutely.
You say what, Cheryl?
I said absolutely.
Well, welcome everyone listening now and listening to in the future. Welcome to Unmasked Real Talk Live. This is the place where Cheryl and I and you get real about topics not often discussed honestly. The topics we choose support our goal to help you feel better, look better, and live better. Today's raffle prize is a copy of our guest book, DNA in the Church Community. Discover how discipleship, nurturing, and accountability influence church growth. Plus, with this great raffle is a sponsored seat at a leadership summit on April 22nd. Now, last week, Cheryl, if you remember, Kayla, our producer, dropped her name.
Did she not? Did she not?
She shown up there, and I'm thinking, wait, if Kayla can get in the raffle,
Come on and say it. Come on and say it.
raffle too. Okay. Anyway, this week's challenge is already dropped in our private Facebook group of the same name, Look Better, Feel Better, Live Better. Be sure to post your comments to the challenge by next Monday, March 27, which is the day before we go live right here on this show. Sure.
Well.
Ready?
You were here with us on last week. If you were here last week, you already know that this is part 2 of a conversation that was started by our guests, the need for vulnerability in the household of faith, known as the church. Well, here's a quote from Brene Brown that says, if we want greater clarity in our purpose, and everybody's talking about purpose, or deeper and more meaningful spiritual lives, vulnerability is the path. We got to come clean, and we got to keep it straight, and we got to be straight up. Now, in order for us to be vulnerable, we must take the risk of exposing ourselves emotionally. It might feel uncertain. I know blessed and highly favored feels real good, but when you talk about vulnerability, it might feel uncomfortable, but there is no other way to the most meaningful experiences in our lives. We were created for a purpose, amen, of connecting with God and others, and vulnerability is one of the requirements. If we can't be straight up with Him, how can we be straight up with other people and let them know what's really going on? Today, we have with us none other than Reverend Marquisa R. Williams, who is the executive pastor of Capacity Church Philly and founder of Elevate Leadership Enterprises. She's back with us for what? Part 2. She opened it up and we left her with a couple tidbits from last week. So what we want her to do is just kind of pick up where we left off, because we talked about, marital relationships. We talked about divorce, and not just that, but we really want to unpack that, because when we think about divorce and the church, that is a topic that does not get the attention that some people have, and some people struggle with that. So we really want her to open it up and let's have some real talk about it. Well, we welcome our sister and our friend, none other than Marquisa. Welcome back into the studio.
I'm so
Hello, my sisters. I am so glad to be back. Woo, last week we had a time. Oh my goodness.
we did. And today is going to be very interesting. And you know what, Reverend Marquise, I want to just introduce to you before you kick this off. I did a poll because I think this is going to be relevant to our discussion. But I set up a poll in Facebook and in LinkedIn, and I asked a very simple question, which was, does your church have a divorce ministry? Now, I was just asking about the church. I wasn't asking about synagogues or other houses of faith. I just was asking about the church. And I got, so far, the poll is still going on, 286 responses, okay? 286 people responded to the poll, which was pretty cool. I don't know if it's statistically relevant, but it's pretty good. Now, listen to this. The question, does your church have a divorce ministry? There's either answer yes, no, or I don't know. Of those who said, I don't know, was 26%. Those who said, yes, my church does, 17%. Those who said, no, my church does not, 57%. And I just thought, I can't help but feel that this information is relevant to the topic of vulnerability in the church, particularly vulnerability among our leaders who are willing to take on people who are in the most vulnerable places of their lives, whether divorced or going through a divorce or going through some breakup, even if you weren't married, but your relationship was rather significant within the church. I just wanted to kick it off with that and see where we could take that.
Woo, that was first of all, that was a sneak attack. You did a survey. You said, let me come with some statistics, some facts here.
Yes.
What's happening? So you said 57% said no.
57% of the responders no.
Said no.
Yeah.
And I do think, right, of course, we're not here at all, right, to bash the church at all. We have some learning to do. We have some growing and development to do. And we spoke last week about how church is supposed to be a community, right?
Yeah.
A community of people with common purpose, common goals. We have hurts, we have all these things, joys, all those. We're supposed to celebrate, we're supposed to grieve together, we're supposed to grow together, we're supposed to do all those things together. That's what community looks like. And I honestly, I'm not surprised at the statistic of 57%. I think that's as one of my favorite people on the planet, Dr. Marsha Brown Woodard, she says those are growing edges, right?
Yes.
We have growing edges. And we learn, as we're experiencing these needs, we do have to make ourselves be accountable to nurture those needs or find resource for those needs. Because again, if someone is coming to me as pastor or coming to the church for this need and they have made themselves vulnerable, right? We got to help them stop the bleeding.
Yes.
Right? We may not be able to fix everything, but we want to be a resource, whether it's in our local body or other places in the community. And so that's where there's a few levels of vulnerability that I see here, right? The vulnerability of the person saying, hey, I need help in this situation. I'm divorced. I'm single. I'm living in this unsaved marriage and I'm coming by myself and I'm grieving. I want them here with me. All those things, right? Then it becomes an accountability for that person who hears it. And the vulnerability comes in where either one, it's an opportunity for them to share the story if it relates to them, to help partner with that person, right? But it's also an opportunity for the church to be vulnerable and say, hey, we don't have that here, but let me help you. Let me find out. And oftentimes we're finding, and we found this a lot, and the pandemic really showed us how or siloed we were as the local body. Right? And we were struggling and suffering in silence, in some, in pillars. I'm going like this because I see just pillars.
Yeah.
These churches planted who are trying to function on their own and not reaching out to say, hey, my brother down the street or my sister's church down the street might have what I need or what my congregants need in this situation. So as so it's it's relationship. How do we help that person that's divorced? How do we help them? It goes back to, we have to restore one another. We always have to go back to the text. We always have to go back to what God says about how we are supposed to restore one another, how we are supposed to walk alongside each other, grieve where each other grieves, and to help mend that. But it takes vulnerability to do that. And sometimes we say, oh, I've been through that divorce. Oh, I'm not even, that's still a sore spot for me. And now it's a sore spot here for this person. And then we let this person walk away, still bleeding and limping with no resource.
Yeah.
That's not what God called us to do.
Yep.
And again, this is a growing edge. This is a growing edge. The more we get to know our congregation, the more we can tap into their needs and find the resources. It's a scripture that talks about, and this was specific to the leader, that we must tend to our flock or identify the needs of our flock. I'm gonna find that text. But we're supposed to pay attention to the flock, right? I don't care if you're a mega church or a small storefront. We may not know the individual names of the people, but at some point there has to be dialogue to tap into what's needed. Because we can preach all day from the pulpit, right? And it's the word of God. But sometimes if we don't know the need, sometimes we don't know what to pour into specifically. There's always a general word for the house, but there is a space where we need to say, hey, we can talk about this from the pulpit, or we bring groups together, right? We bring like-minded people together to talk about it. I may not know about divorce, but there are people who are, and there are people who are sitting silent with a testimony that could help. And that's where these ministries form, like a divorce ministry forms. There's where, singles ministry should form. We tap into the common things, women, men, children, but it's all these other issues in between that we have to tackle into. While I'm a woman, I still have these things. While I'm a man, I have these things. While I'm a child, I have these things that we have to tap into. And that's so critical as we are talking about being vulnerable. So we don't have to have it all, but we have to seek out who does. And sometimes that might mean referring somebody for counseling. Do we have that, those options? Not every church has a counseling ministry. And this is something that is actually my book. And I kind of let the reader off the hook to say, you don't have to have all the resources, but you have to connect to people who do. And don't be ashamed that you don't know. And that's where the vulnerability comes in. Because we have these churches who might be like, I know it's a need, but I can't tell them. I can't let my guard down. Pride kills us.
We're still on Unmasked Real Talk Live, right?
We are.
I want to go someplace in addition to this place, which is related to breakups, unhappy marriages that lead to breakup, and vulnerability. The leaders, I don't know if I think in all of my years of being in the house of God, I've only heard one pastor ever talk honestly that his marriage wasn't ideal. And I think part of the problem here, my theory, I love to come up with my own theories, that we're not really talking about and helping with divorce in the church is because our leaders don't feel comfortable talking about vulnerability in their own relationships. I mean, every pastor thinks that we think, that every pastor and the wife or the husband, because some pastors can be female, have a perfect relationship. That it's all great. It's all wonderful when we know it ain't. So I would like to ask, why can't we get the leaders of the church to talk honestly about how things aren't perfect in their own lives, in their own worlds, in their own situations, rather than appearing to be perfect?
Um,
But this is on National Talk Live.
Go right ahead, Mark. I love the question that Pam put out there, and I'm looking at the chat, and Dr. Latrice says that connect with people who do, and don't be ashamed to connect to those who do have the resources. And one of the things that Reverend Marquisa knows, that we have a Wives of Wellness ministry. And what happens is a platform when we talk about building community where women come in, whether they're divorced, whether they're married, in challenging relationships, be a good relationship, or they might want to be married. One of the things that we embrace is the willingness to be vulnerable and to talk about those real situations that go on. And something that you said, Pam, was so timely that we talk about is like, don't look at something from the outside and just because it looks a certain way, assume that that's a perfect relationship. Because when we have real talk, guess what comes out? It's not a perfect relationship. Those challenges, like the conversation does go forth. And Marquisa, you've been in the space. I want you to address that, because as I'm listening and we're talking about real talk, we're looking at what it is that some of our leaders could do. But I also have an interest in when there is a challenge in the relationship, on the other side, the individual perhaps not saying anything. What's the why behind that?
Mm-hmm. It all falls into pride, embarrassment, all those things. But I want to say is also what I want to say here is it's not solely on the leader. I want to be clear about that, because sometimes we do have to speak up about the need. And I think when we look at Wives of Wellness, right?
Mm-hmm.
There are people who were willing to lead the group, right, to start the group. So I think that it's a partnership. Bring it to the leader to get permission to have these things, because but also, to Pam's point, sometimes the leader may not be equipped or believe that they're equipped to teach it, right? But again, that's where that vulnerability comes in, to say, hey, I don't know how, but is there anybody in the house who has this experience or this expertise or is willing to bring these groups together, right? I do think there's some unmasking that all of us have to do, from the pulpit to the door.
Yes.
Right? We all have to unmask and not put this facade on that things are perfect. Listen, I don't want, I'm a person who's willing to be vulnerable or share some things when appropriate with a group of people about, a struggle, whether it's marriage or some form of relationship. But it's always in its time. But I do know that there are times where, the leader may not even know how to even touch it or tap it. I don't want people to see me and my husband arguing. And I'm quite sure, listen, we've been married almost 30 years, and there's going to be some arguments, hands down.
Yeah.
But those things, we don't, at the same time, don't put on this facade like, it's perfect. And Pam, so I think to your point is, we should talk about it more. But I do think there's some responsibility on us in the pews too, to say, hey, this is what we want.
Yeah.
Right. It's like this snowball effect. Right?
I actually appreciate that. And I appreciate you saying it, because I'm thinking back to my experience. Like, I left the church when I was going through my divorce, because one, I didn't find them very supportive. It was almost like, shh, we're not going to talk about it. When there were lots of people divorcing in the church. I mean, right now, when I look back, there are lots of marriages that ended in that church. But I'm thinking about, wow, you're right. Maybe I could have gone to my pastor and said, I need to know how to navigate this thing. I don't know if I should stay. Should I go? I got 4 kids. I mean, I was so lost in many ways.
Mm-hmm.
And it didn't occur to me, to be honest with you, to go to the leadership and say, can you help a sister out?
Mm-hmm.
Can you give us some resources that will make this easier? How do I deal with the embarrassment? If I see somebody in the church at the store and they're like, well, where you been? What do I say? Those are the things that I guess I could have talked about or asked about.
Mm-hmm.
I guess I assumed
Mhm.
you love me as a member,
Mhm.
and you know that we don't have perfect lives, that you do what you need to do to make sure your people, your flock, are taken care of. That was a huge assumption, and you're
Yeah.
right. I think
Yeah.
many of us in the pews do make that assumption, sort of like when you're married, you just expect your spouse to know what you need. Well,
Mhm.
not necessarily. You need to tell them what
Right.
you like, what you don't like, what you need, what you prefer.
Mhm.
Same kind of communication, I think.
Exactly. And one of the things, that's a great point that you raised, Pam. And someone put in the chat, and I want to share it. That says, as someone who was divorced in the church, I was ashamed and shunned by many people as if I had a disease, but God. And what happens is that emotion, and I love the fact that they shared that, because when you experience that, if you even had a willingness to talk to somebody, if you're experiencing that, that's going to do what? It's going to shut you down. It's
Mhm.
going to shut you
It
down.
will shut you down. It
And
will.
I think that that's what happens. But someone else says the responsibility of resolution flows both ways, and it truly does. It truly does. But some good feedback in here. Divorce is death without a funeral. Ooh, what?
Mm.
Wow.
And where do we hold most of our funerals? In the church.
Oh Lord, have mercy.
And I would say to that sister,
Y'all,
that
y'all cutting up.
death without a funeral is, until you realize the transformational power of divorce, which is a topic that I'm going to be speaking on next week. Until you learn the transformational power of your struggle, then it's not a funeral. It's actually a resurrection. So, but that's all I'm gonna say on that, because this is your time, Reverend Marquisa.
This is
I think I'm looking at the time, and I'm wondering if we should get to the unmasked question and then the takeaways.
Yes, we should. Our unmasked question is to our audience, and somebody could put in there again. Why do you find it challenging to be vulnerable? And we want you to personalize in your faith community. Why do you find it challenging? Yeah.
Okay. Well, while they think on that unmasked question and then respond, and we'll give some of those responses. Because of the time, I'm thinking maybe we should go to the 3 takeaways.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sure.
Okay.
And I'm just going to drop a resource if I can really quick.
Please, yes. Mhm.
So when we were, Pam, you were, talking or asking about this whole divorce situation, where are some resources and things like that. There was a ministry that I started when I was serving at Enoch Tabernacle Baptist Church, and I served in leadership there in their counseling space. And I started a ministry there in partnership with the pastor over that ministry, Reverend Leroy Miles. And it's a ministry we called it Where Do We Go From Here? And it's for separated and divorced. And I started that ministry over 10 years ago, and it's still alive.
I love that.
And it's still going, right? And so, but it took more and more. We started seeing all these counseling cases. We started seeing people talking more about it was more about separation at the time. It was like, what is going on? And then it was the divorce piece, and they just flocked in. And it was the people who are leading it were the people who were overcoming in a healthy way, overcoming divorce, overcoming being separated, and they were able to pour into those groups, and they were able to share and go forward. But that in ministry still happens. So again, listen, I'm the executive pastor of Capacity Church Philly, right? We don't have this particular ministry, but we know somebody who does. Okay, and so we're going to send them there. And so for those who are watching, if you're in Philly, go there. You know. And we have to get resources and know what we have right now and where we can send people to going forward, right? So I just wanted to drop that piece there and an example that we need to partner.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
do need to partner. We be okay that I'm okay that we don't have it yet,
Yes.
Yeah, I
but
love
we know the people who do.
it. Okay.
Okay.
All right. So our takeaways. Why don't you lay it out on us? Lay it out for us.
All right. So the takeaways. Oh my goodness. Let me get my little notes. Okay. So the takeaways were vulnerability opens the door for grace
Yes.
and healthy relationships.
Mhm.
Again, we always have to be discerning about
Mhm.
the timing of vulnerability. But when there's a need, we have to, it allows people to see us as human.
Mhm.
It allows for grace to come in and to people to empathize and to restore and to build healthy relationships.
Mhm.
Okay. Takeaway number 2 is vulnerability brings about transformation
Mm.
personally,
Mhm.
spiritually, in all areas of life where we need it.
Yes.
Because again, we may be vulnerable in certain situations,
Mhm.
and it's easy to do, with our children or whomever, right?
Mhm.
But it changes us. It takes us to a whole nother place. It gives us confidence. It restores us. It connects us closer with God. It should. And these are shoulds. And then lastly is vulnerability expresses to God that we are open to receive what he has for us,
Yeah.
that we're open to receive.
Yeah.
And so that kind of piggybacked off of, and I think Reverend Cheryl, you mentioned this, about being vulnerable with God. We have to be vulnerable with God.
Mhm.
And an example of that is Psalm 51:7. And that's the example of us connecting with God and then being vulnerable with ourselves, being honest with what's weighing us down. Going back to David, Psalm 139, search me, oh God, try me, search me, get to see where those places where I'm vulnerable so I can be healed, right?
Yes. Yes. Love
And then being vulnerable with each other, loving on one each other, restoring one another, praying for one another, confessing to one another. We need all of those things for those 3 points to happen. So the three takeaways, again, really super quick. Vulnerability opens the door for grace and healthy relationships.
Mhm.
Vulnerability brings about transformation in our lives. And vulnerability expresses to God that we are open to receive what he has for us. But it starts with us.
It's
Mm.
us.
Mm.
Whether you're the pastor, whether you're the pew, whether you're the sister, the brother, the mother, the father, it starts with us.
Yeah.
It's courage. It
Yeah.
was a quote you said about from Brene Brown.
Yes.
Brene Brown.
Mhm.
And she talked about in her book about vulnerability that it brings about it's courage that
Yes.
happens as well.
Yeah.
It helps us to be more courageous when we open ourselves up. And she says that vulnerability is the courage to be imperfect.
Mm.
It releases us to relate, to empathize, and be less judgmental.
Yes.
Mhm. Nice, nice. Those were some amazing takeaways, and we have about 2 minutes, and then we got to roll out of here. So I'm wondering if we can great takeaways, great discussion. We can transition to the raffle.
Yes. Yes.
We get the book and the hot seat at the summit. Yeah. All right, Kayla, take it away. Ooh, wait, Cheryl, do you see your name?
I don't see my name in there, but I already got a book. I already got a book.
All right. All right.
Congratulations.
Congratulations. We're going to make sure we get that book to you. So if we don't have your address, please, or however we're going to do it, Cheryl, you'll know, right?
Absolutely, because I believe that Reverend Marquise is going to autograph it and then send it out. So we will actually send that. And thank you. Congratulations. Well,
Congrats.
wrap us up. Yes.
Yeah. And we definitely will want to make sure we put the link to your book in the show notes so people can purchase it either way from Amazon or from you if they want it signed. So thank you again, Reverend Marquisa, for being with us
Sure.
today. Let me just close this thing out and just encourage everyone who's listening now and will listen in the future that if you're one of those individuals who's hiding a secret that you don't matter or you're not enough, and this secret is messing with your mind, your money, your relationships, it's messing with your family love and dynamics, your health, your wealth, even your career. If this secret is holding you back, that you are not enough and that you don't matter, then we want you, Cheryl and I want you to not fear, because the dual coaches are here. The dual coaches, Cheryl and me. Yes, we have a 10-week program that we have perfected that will show you how to tap into the hidden power of your self-worth. It's self-worth superpower by changing one thing. And if you feel like you're right for this course, we want you to email us at hellobeautiful@executivebeauty.net, and we'll send you a questionnaire to determine if you're right for this program. I see that we're over time, so bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you, Reverend Martin. And thank you all for joining us. Next week, same time, same place, same purpose, to unmask and host our Real Talk Live.
Bye-bye.